Welcome to my channel, Dialogue of Civilizations. And today I would like to discuss with you a very important topic, and it is connected with the possibility of the summit in Budapest that may take place in November or beginning of December between Trump and Putin. And I would like to start with one question: why it has not taken place before, as it was scheduled? And the reasons, there are a few reasons, and one of the main reasons from my point of view, which is not very much discussed in the West, is the civilizational differences between Russia and modern Ukraine that stand in the way now between the signing of this treaty. This is one reason. The second reason is, and my channel is called the Dialogue of Civilization, is the difference reason, really the main reason is the misunderstanding between Trump and Putin and his teams that sometimes do not allow them to sign agreement when it comes to signing, actually. And the third one is the trap that Putin and Zelensky found themselves in this war. So let us start with the civilizational problem. The thing is that Ukraine for many centuries was developing as part of Russia, main territory of Ukraine, and mainly Ukrainian people. They consider themselves to be Russians, and Russians consider Ukrainians are to be also Russians, but a little bit different Ukrainians because on the borders. But for some time, starting with 19th especially century, Ukraine started developing nationalism, the Ukrainian nationalism. And nationalism was developed and appeared not in Russia, historically Russian part of Ukraine, but the part that was for few centuries was under control of other states, including Poland, Hungary, and Austria. But then nationalism started penetrating more and more, spreading in Ukraine. And the reasons were mainly because the differences in mentality between Ukrainian people and Russian people, they were increasing, and historically there were different trends, and let us put it, instability of Russian Empire first, and then in the Soviet Union, it was actually Ukraine has become a republic that was under control of mostly Ukrainians or people who lived in Ukraine, as for example Jews, who are important and rather big part of Ukrainian population, especially in the south. And the main problem appeared after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Within these 35 years, Ukraine started developing their own as an independent state, became an independent state for the first time in its history. And as many countries or republics in the former Soviet Union, which became the separate independent states, they started looking for their own national ideology. And they started looking for a national ideology, and in the absence of communism or any other ideology, and absence of this ideology in Russia, they started looking for their own ideology, and the ideology that was most acceptable to them and easily acceptable was nationalism, national unity, and national development. And that's why Ukraine started developing this nationalism. And there was a huge problem, or misunderstanding, based on misunderstanding maybe. The huge problem that was created by first Yeltsin's team, and then people close to Putin who are responsible for the relationship between Ukraine and Russia. Because they underestimated this process of nationalization of Ukraine. They were looking at Ukraine as a separate state, but very integrated. They were developing their own businesses and cooperation and all this thing, using these differences in two states in solving their own problems, and sometimes using corruption methods. And that's why this process of Ukraine becoming anti-Russia during this 35 years came out of control of Moscow and the Kremlin. And when it appeared that Ukraine has become very anti-Russian, especially inside, anti-Russian communities, anti-Russian territories, language, culture, and all these things, it was too late to solve this with easy means, traditional means. And then there were different forces in Ukraine, in the West, and inside Russia, that became interested in creating situation like war, special operation, they call it, and getting Putin into this. Why? Because they were interested in creating problems for Putin in Russia and forcing Putin to change elites. That is what is going on now. So the war was in the interest of groups, some groups in Ukraine, some groups or political circles in forces outside of Ukraine and Russia, but also inside Russia. But now Zelensky and Putin found themselves in one situation. Zelensky can't accept the demands of Putin or Russia because the majority of the population are very anti-Russian, especially after 3 years of the war. Putin cannot drop his demands for different reasons, including that if he drops the demands, especially allows Ukraine to stay anti-Russian, he will be looked and considered by majority of Russian people as a loser and one of the biggest losers in the history of Russia. Both of them, Zelensky and Putin, they belong to post-Soviet generation of politicians. And all of these politicians, they're afraid of being considered equal to or in one group with Gorbachev and Yeltsin, who are most hated politicians in the history of Russia and of former Soviet Union, including now independent states. Why? Because during their leadership period, Russia and Soviet Union was facing the most of the problems and faced collapse, and leaving Ukraine anti-Russian will be considered as a second stage of the collapse of the Soviet Union or of Russia. How to make it? How to find the solution? How to find the compromise? And there is a huge problem here. The thing is that Putin can't, he is very difficult, it is very difficult for him and for the people around him. Because he brought this situation and he pushed Russia and Ukraine into this situation. It is very difficult to find the solution by Zelensky, because he is playing a certain role. He understands that if he agrees to conditions, Putin's conditions, he will mostly and very quickly he will lose his power and maybe life. And because of misunderstanding of these civilizational differences, it is very difficult for Trump to find a solution between Putin and Zelensky. And there is one more important point here. The problem is that Europe step aside from the attempt to find solutions. Because Europe is more close, especially, Eastern Europe, they're close to Russia and to Ukraine. And they may find some, or assist, or help in finding solutions. But Europe is out. And that is the decision made by European leaders. And one more point, and I think this is the most important. To find a solution, you have to look from absolutely different angle, and to look at the problem from as an independent force or independent people. And these people who can find the solution, they are to be specialists in social, in history, in social sciences. They are not to be politicians. They are not to be controlled by politics. They are not to operate in favor of this clan or that clan, in favor of Putin or in favor of Trump or in favor of Zelensky. So I'm speaking that it is important to start track 2. This is the chance for Russians, for Ukrainian people, and for the Western Europe to find the solution and the compromise, the possibility of compromise, in quiet way, without conflicts, stepping aside from all these day-to-day problems or events on the front. And I would like to make this appeal, because I know that in the West, and including the United Kingdom, there are people who specialize in this. And I think it is, and in Europe also. And there is a feeling in Europe, in Russia, in Ukraine, that the time has come to come with this idea and to implement it, to start this process, quiet process of not winning the war, not taking over power or whatever, but to find the solution and compromise that can bring now there are 2 civilizations on the territory of Russia, former Russian Empire. These 2 civilizations to bring together and to solve the problem and to drop confrontation between them. Let us discuss this in my next video. I would like to discuss this from different angles, but let us participate. Please, I invite you to take part in it. Thank you. Please subscribe.